Hello everyone and welcome to Lancaster Safety's Webinar Wednesday. My name is Brandon and I will be your moderator today. Today's topic is what to do when OSHA shows up. And presenting is Jeff Courtwright and Irv Kruger. And I'll start by introducing Jeff Corky Courtwright. And he's been with Lancaster Safety for about 2 years now and currently conducts training sessions and on-site safety audits for us. Corky has been on several job sites that have been visited by OSHA in his 40 years of working construction and now welcomes OSHA when they show up. He has been an OSHA outreach trainer for 15 years and has trained thousands in the OSHA 10 and 30-hour training courses all over the country. He has been fortunate to be a part of OSHA-awarded VPP worksite with 700 other construction workers and is very passionate about spreading the safety message. He has been invited by OSHA to share the safety success story at regional VPP conferences, to members of Senate subcommittees, and even internationally in Prague. Corky tells true stories during his safety training sessions, and you may hear some of those today during our presentation. Our other presenter, Irv Kruger, has been involved in safety program development and training for over 30 years. He received his OSHA Outreach Training Certificate in 1989. He worked in the construction trades as a millwright and then went to work for OSHA in 1997 until he retired in 2009. Irv's passion is to assist both employers and employees in the importance of understanding not only how to be safe, but why to be safe. Irv has been an outreach trainer for Lancaster since his retirement. Gentlemen, I will turn this over to you at this time to present what to do when OSHA shows up.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Brandon. It's good to be here. This is Corky Courtwright speaking, and my sidekick, Irv Kruger. Irv, we've been both working around each other for several years, and it's a pleasure to do the show with you. Before we get started, I think probably if we go to the first slide here, we want to get a feel for our audience here, and it's called an Insta Safety Poll. What do you want to get out of this webinar today? With this, Irv, I think we'll get a good feel for how our audience is.
Right, Corky. An OSHA inspection can cause a lot of stress for people, and we want to know if they've had an OSHA inspection, if they have never had an OSHA inspection, and more or less what they expect to get out of this seminar. As if OSHA does come calling, you want to know what to do. So we'll wait for the poll.
Okay. And if you look there, have you ever had you've never had an OSHA inspection and you want to be prepared? You've been inspected by OSHA before and would like to have a plan in place if another inspection occurs. And number 3, if you're an individual looking to understand the process of an OSHA inspection. So it looks like most of our audience is concerned about understanding the whole process of an OSHA inspection. So I think, Irv, if we can tweak it in that direction, I think will really be a benefit to our audience. Okay, so all right, so here's OSHA. OSHA shows up. Irv, can I share a story real quick on my first episode with OSHA? Okay, first time, again, I was working construction, and we were taught if OSHA shows up, you run. You close up the gang box, put your tools away, close up the gang box, and you go to the bar, and you hope OSHA disappears. Now, those are different now. So you want to fill us in there on what really goes on now, Irv?
First, let me say that OSHA shows up. You need to know what to do. And Lancaster, that's one of the things that they provide is a summary sheet for the clients they have to know what to do when they show up. It's a sheet that you give to each employee that tells them to request their credentials and things like that, but it's a plan. Most people are scared when OSHA comes because OSHA is the law. OSHA is the safety police, and a lot of people have misunderstandings. When OSHA first started out, they gave them book of regulations, and OSHA says, let's go use these, and they started writing citations up, right, and left, and they really got a reputation, if you've ever seen the OSHA Santa Claus or the OSHA Cowboy, of being overly zealous. And OSHA came back and said, wait, let's take a look at this. OSHA is paid for by Congress. It's not the fines that pay OSHA. So when OSHA came calling, OSHA went to the Congress and says, give us more money, we'll give more fines. And somebody says, wait a minute, you're supposed to be saving lives and preventing injuries. And so OSHA took a much different approach. They're still the enforcement end, but they did a lot more in outreach and training. And so what we want to do today is go through and say what to do when OSHA does come calling. You need a game plan.
Okay, so your initial contact with OSHA, they show up on at your workplace or your job site. Then what happens, Irv?
Well, it depends on who's there. When OSHA shows up, it's usually a receptionist or a secretary in an office building, or if it's a construction site, it could be one of the laborers or workers, or it could be a superintendent. Most construction sites this day and age do have a policy for vendors to come on, and they'll have somebody that makes contact. But I know that the first thing you want to do when OSHA shows up, no matter, is you want to identify and see their credentials, their government identification. It's just very much like any government agency or entity. It's a leather wallet with usually a badge and a very official looking thing. Just given a business card and or if they have a name tag or something like that's wonderful, but they have to show their credentials. It's part of the law. I've seen situations where individuals like to pose as OSHA inspectors and create many problems. Like the call I got from a contractor accusing OSHA costing him over $500,000. Come to find out, when I was with OSHA, this contractor was re-roofing, and he said OSHA came out and shut my job down and made all my guys go home until they had adequate fall protection. I said, sir, OSHA doesn't shut a job down. They don't have the authority without uh, injunction. And OSHA, usually this was a Saturday, and I said, can you identify him? No, I wasn't there. It was my foreman. And it goes on to find out that the guy that was pretending to be OSHA was another contractor who didn't get the job, that wanted to make sure the contractor that was successful cost him a lot of money. So OSHA frowns on people pretending to be OSHA, and I've seen situations where there is a fine associated with that. You want to contact the appropriate company official, and that in that summary that Lancaster would give you would be provided who to contact, who the safety person is, or who the owner is, or who the super. It identifies who's going to take charge when OSHA comes calling, because somebody clearly has to know what to do, or it can really run into a fiasco and be very expensive.
Okay, so now we're talking about getting the management there. Now, what do they mean by that, Irv?
Well, you ask for the senior person on the job site, and many times when you hit a site, they say we want our safety person involved, or we have to have the corporate safety person available and things like that. Can you wait until they arrive? OSHA's position is they will wait for a reasonable amount of time, usually no more than an hour, for somebody to arrive. If that person is, say, 2 or 3 hours away, what OSHA oftentimes will do, what the compliance officer will do, is say, well, I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and do a brief opening conference, then we'll go on and do the walkthrough, and they can join us when they get here. Because they don't, OSHA, the inspection cannot be delayed, because what happens is as soon as OSHA shows up on the job, word goes out quick, clean up all your messes and make it look like we're doing everything right. And they'll cover over things that should really be addressed. So the delay, again, about an hour under OSHA's field operations manual that will allow the compliance officer to wait. Otherwise, the inspection should get started.
Okay, so we got another Insta safety poll here. Can I refuse to let OSHA in on my job site or workplace? There's our screen that pops up. Yes, you can refuse OSHA, or no, you cannot. And looks like most of our audience says, yes, you can refuse?
Well, in certain cases, you have the right for refusal. If you go, again, technically, you can refuse to let OSHA in, but remember, OSHA, the law says you have to let OSHA come on site. You can request OSHA not come and refuse them. And what OSHA will do is then go get a warrant to come back and go on the site. Now, before OSHA ever comes to your site, oftentimes they've done a preliminary investigation already on your record. If they get a complaint on a company, or if they have a reason that they want to look, they'll look that company up before they ever go there and find out what their history is. They'll know the history of that company oftentimes, unless it's a spot inspection where they just happened to was in plain view and saw it. But you have to let them on once they get a warrant. I've seen it go beyond that, but I don't think anybody wants to fight with the government, because if you refuse after they have a warrant, it's just like a policeman coming into your home. You don't have to let the police into your house, but if they have a warrant, then you have to let them in. So they're going to get in if they really need to, and all you're going to do is delay the process. And OSHA compliance officers are told, don't uh, make a big deal out of being refused. Just come get the warrant and go back and do it. But like I know, people don't like to be put off and put down, so they oftentimes will look a little closer if you don't want to cooperate with them. It's best everybody cooperate with each other. There are situations where companies have a policy you don't let them on because uh, they'll say not without a warrant. Well, if that's the case, then OSHA oftentimes will get a warrant prior to ever going out to do the inspection. But the best blame plan is just to consult with your safety counsel or your safety advisors. Hopefully it would be Lancaster, but consult with them as to the best game plan and types of situations you'd run into.
Okay, so one of the first things on your agenda too is to call your safety company, in this case, Lancaster Safety Consulting. And then what happens, Irv?
Well, many companies have attorneys that they automatically call anytime they're doing business with any government entity. If it was the IRS or if it was the sheriff's department, they'll want to have an attorney present, and that's understandable. But oftentimes, the attorneys, there are labor attorneys and safety attorneys that specialize in safety and health, but they're very expensive and they're by the hour. And some attorneys have the experience with OSHA, but I strongly, and I know Lancaster strongly encourages to solve the problem at the least level. In other words, you can bring in the high-priced attorneys and the big guns to fight OSHA, but why not, if you know you're doing wrong anyway, and OSHA points it out, it's a spirit of cooperation. If you show OSHA you want to cooperate, and it kind of says, I'm going to fight if you call your attorney. I strongly suggest, and I know Lancaster is done enough work with OSHA, and OSHA respects a lot of these safety consultants. Lancaster is tremendously respected by OSHA, and they can speak for the contractor or the employer, and a simple phone call and find out what the status is, what's going on, and put the thing to ease and resolve the issues with the least amount of trouble. And oftentimes get reductions on fines or get fines waived in agreeing that the company will do some participation in some type of a safety activity or program. It's not always all fines. It starts with fines, but again, it's a process that Lancaster is good at negotiating settlement agreements, and that's what OSHA does. If you have an inspection, you have time to have an informal conference with OSHA, and Lancaster has been in many of these to help the people get a settlement before they ever have to go into, say, court. It's kind of like plea bargaining prior to going to court in traffic court or something like this. It's a way of talking and explaining the employer's side of the issue when they get a citation.
Okay, so let's get started. So after this conference you have when OSHA first shows up, then they go on with an inspection.
Right. Well, when OSHA first comes, they're going to show again. They have to have their credentials. They show their credentials, and if you have any doubt, you can call the office they're sent from and say, "Is this person supposed to be here?" You can check on that OSHA person. I've had that happen to me where I've shown them my credentials and shown them my business card. They still called the regional office and said, "This guy, do you know who he is? Why is he here?" And that was a situation where people had tried to test their security by pretending to be OSHA. So I understood that. But after you take in your credentials, you get the senior person on the site. Now, in a company, it's going to be generally the safety director or plant manager and things like that. On construction, you have a number of employers, so you want to get your bigger employers involved if you can't get them all involved. In other words, take the bigger ones and let them be responsible for their subcontractors. But again, subcontractors would be encouraged to be at that opening conference. The opening conference is going to explain to the people the basis of why that inspector is there. Was it an accident? Was it a complaint, a referral? Follow-up inspection. It might be a referral from media. It might be a referral from some doctor that says we've had a lot of cases of some happening with the employees here, so they'll start to do an investigation as to why is this happening. So that compliance officer will advise you of what the inspection is about. It may be a partial inspection. Most of them in construction, if they go with what they call the Focus 4. They're looking at falls, caught in, struck by, and electrical hazards. Those four things are, if you correct those, you're not going to have major accidents with the other issues. So they say focus on those four, and that's more like a partial. In order to get a Focus 4 inspection, you do have to have a safety program, and it has to be in place and communicated to the employees. So at the opening conference, you're going to look at certain documents.
So would this be a good time, Irv, for me to bring out my written safety program, you think?
Absolutely. The opening conference is important because it gives the opportunity to the employer to demonstrate what they do. I've gone on sites where people, when I was with OSHA, I remember going to a site, said, "Hi, I'm with OSHA." And they says, "Welcome, let me show you what we're doing." And this construction company was very proud of their safety program and no fear of OSHA because they understood the roles, they knew they were doing it right, and they knew they were just confident in OSHA coming on site. And it was really nice. There's other times when you go on and people will try to hide OSHA or make it difficult for you. But really, a good faith effort is shown, and OSHA can discount, has a percentage of a discount on the citation if you're cooperative and show that good faith. So it's a lot easier to do things if people are working together, even though you have differences of opinion and different perspectives, it's still better to work together. So yes, you'd want to bring out your safety program.
Okay, so it looks like we got another Insta safety quiz here. Which of the following documentation should you have ready for OSHA at that opening conference? And we're looking at safety manuals, 2, copies of previous OSHA citations, 3, record-keeping logs, 4, workers' comp claims, and Irv, can you help me on the rest of those?
Well, verification of training, logs for training logs and pictures of all your employees are the questions. Now, as we let people do that and take the poll, if we've had time for them to take the poll, we can go on to the next slide and talk about the documentation you need. Definitely, you do not need copies of previous OSHA citations. OSHA will already have that information. The record-keeping logs, absolutely you want to have. Workers' comp claims are of no business to OSHA, and they don't have anything to do with it. You've got a separate log that you keep for OSHA. Training logs are very much important to prove that you operate in safety, and pictures of your employees are really Not necessary either. You need to have the name and address. So if you have any other programs in addition to your regular safety program, you'll have components to your safety program, which will be a respiratory protection plan, hazard communication program, or HAZCOM. You'll have a confined space program, hot work permitting processes for the things that are not normally done every day, but are specialties that have to have safety. There's special programs within your safety program. So, and this is what Lancaster also does, is they not just throw a safety program together, they put a program together, but then they identify the segments of that program and go into deeper depth so that you know if you're doing a lot of chemical work, your HAZCOM program is up to snuff. If you're doing a lot of forklift operators, then you have to have forklift training and forklift plan. You have to have fall protection program. Now, a person that says lays carpet and tile wouldn't necessarily need a fall protection program, but they would have a component that says if and when we have to go put carpet up the sides of the walls above so many feet, then we want fall protection. So anytime that there's a situation, and that's a review of what safety programs you need to be able to identify your safety discipline policy so that everybody is disciplined the same. And you need to have all of your safety manuals, and they need to be reviewed once a year. So the documentation for construction companies is the same as with other companies, but there it's much more critical because many times the subcontractor has to do this anyway for the general. And if the general is allowing, well, let's just say that we talk maybe after about the multi-employer workforce, where you have more than one employer and who's responsible. But the documentation is somewhat different than in construction companies for that.
So there's a lot more that you need after that even, Irv?
You need to document the records keeping for injuries and illnesses. You need to do your training logs and your new hire training. You need to do your discipline logs. You need to do accident investigations. Anything you do along this line, you know, the government and all entities loves paperwork, but anything you do along these lines, it's important that you can verify. And if it's not written down, how do you verify it? So if it's not written down, it's not been done. So
I noticed they mentioned new hire there. New hire training, is that very important?
it's extremely important. If you look at the statistics, most accidents happen with somebody in their first less than 6 months on the job, and less than the first hires are the ones that have the most accidents because they are not identified with what they're doing yet. They don't know the hazards, so they've got to be trained in what those hazards are. One of the things that you have to do, no matter what, it's in the law, is a hazard assessment. What are the hazards in your job? And if you don't identify, you probably, most people and most employees will know these things, but again, write them down because there could be a chance you might have missed something. So you write them down, and then you have them and say, I have done. When OSHA comes and inspects, they're going to say, let me see your hazard assessment. And it should be an assessment signed by a corporate official. Okay? Your 300 logs, again, that's...
Yeah, 300 logs. What are those, Irv?
They're the safety and health logs. There's accidents are either recordable, and OSHA tracks incidents that are more than just first aid. First aid, if you cut your finger and put a Band-Aid on it, it's okay. But there's where you can really use help from a safety consultant, is they know what is recordable and what isn't. In other words, if I get a bump on the head and it knocks me down, it's cool. But if it knocks me out, that is recordable and it has to be put on the log. So there's a number of different issues that, like an x-ray, even though you hit your arm and you got an x-ray, it may not be recordable because an x-ray is a diagnostic tool rather than a first aid thing. Okay, they x-ray your arm, it's not broken, it's sprained. Well, it might be, it's not as, it still may or may not be recordable. And there's oftentimes questions. If there's time lost from work, it's recordable. If it's transferred to another job, it's recordable. And there's a question and answer sheet that OSHA provides, but again, your safety consultants are very well skilled at knowing what is and isn't recordable. And you say, well, no matter what, I'm going to report it. The thing there is that you may be costing yourself work, because if you over-report, it's just as bad as under-reporting, because it gives you a missed sense of value in what your company and safety program is. So does that answer that pretty good, Corky?
Yeah, perfect, Irv, thanks. No. All right, so finally, so we're just getting out of the office now, and we're going to be walking through
Now,
the work site now, right?
oftentimes it might be that you do an abbreviated opening conference to get to where it is. If I've got a complaint, I'll walk through and say, we've got a complaint, and go through what I need, and then we'll go to the walkthrough. Upon completion of the opening conference, the OSHA inspector or compliance officer will walk to where the accident is, or where the violation is, alleged, I want to say alleged violation is. Or they'll start through, if it's a complaint, where the complaint is located, where that issue is. They'll walk through the plant. Now, on a partial inspection, they'll go straight to where that issue is and address it. Along the way, if they see a cord across the floor that's a tripping hazard, or a exposed light fixture or electrical panel, they will note it and tell you. If that happens, you're wise to go ahead and fix it immediately if they pointed it out to you, because it's called abatement advantage. If you abate the problem, it gives you a little bit of more credibility with if there is a citation to issue. Now, there are some areas that they call trade secrets, and there are procedures for that. Again, your safety consultant could work with you on that. If it's a secret ingredients, you don't have to share it, but if it's chemically, you have to have, there's means to get that information without exposing your trade secret. The walkthrough, again, as you're walking through, they're going to talk to various employees and look at potential safety and health violations that are in plain sight. They're not going to go on a, let's turn over every rock and look at it, unless they have to go to a very comprehensive inspection. But if you see something wrong, take immediate corrective action to clarify that, even if it's get everybody away from here until we can get this repaired type of thing, or even if it's get everybody away from here until we can get this repaired type of thing, or if it may be just removing it from a broken ladder, taking it out of service.
Okay, we have another Insta poll here. Is OSHA allowed to ask employees questions? And it's a yes or no answer here. Looks like we have quite a few people answering yes and no. So what is the right answer on that one, Irv?
Well,
no. So what is the right answer on that one, Irv?
absolutely, OSHA can ask questions. I think the better way to discuss that, though, would be to talk about, they're going to do an interview with employees. They're required, compliance officers are required to do a certain number of percentage, if you will, of the employees working. And they're going to ask them questions. First off, the OSHA compliance officer and the employee are going to go off by themselves. They're not going to leave a superintendent or a foreman or a lead person go into the interview with them. They're going to say, we just want to interview the employees, and it's not a Miranda rights type thing, but it's just an interview to ask them certain questions about the job site. If the company says, well, not without my attorney present, or not without, then OSHA is going to say, give me a list of the names and addresses of all your employees. We'll contact them at home. But they will interview. They are interviewed and they're asked questions. How long have you been with the company? What's your job here? Have you seen anybody get hurt? What happens when you violate a safety rule? What training have you had? And all they're going to do is work to document from the employee's side the safety program. You can talk to employees through interview and find out just really what the safety is all about. and what is being enforced. And oh yeah, if I cut my hand, I get chewed out, but the superintendent can break his finger and nobody knows, and things like that. But it's basically questions: the type of work, what hazards do you have, what happens when you violate, do you know what an STS log is, do you know where it's kept, have you ever seen the safety program, how often are you trained, and those types of questions. It's just to get a feel for the safety and health at the work site, the culture of safety there.
So where would the workers get the answers for these questions?
As far as they just have to answer honestly. I mean, how long have you worked here? Have you seen an accident? Yes or no? If yes, say what was it? Have you seen somebody get hurt? Who was it? Say I saw, let me just as an example say Corky, I saw Corky break his arm. And now I'm looking at the record keeping. I don't see where Corky's got any, nobody's got broken arms here. I'm going to say, well, what about this Corky guy? Okay, well then that's going to verify that they are keeping the logs right. So that's where that's coming in at.
And
Now,
the employee would have to be able to know where the SDS manual's at and all that?
they should know. If they don't know, then it's a violation because they have to be trained in the process. And in order to be trained in the process, you have to know where to access it at.
Gotcha.
So yes, definitely.
Okay, so now, okay, so you're walking around with the OSHA guys, and what should management be doing during this walkthrough?
They should be shadowing the OSHA compliance officer. If the OSHA compliance officer is going to be taking pictures and or videos, I would strongly suggest you take video or photos of the same things the compliance officer does. Take notes of any comments he says or anything he does. Just keep track of what he's saying so that you can identify. So you can look at what he's suggested, like he says, well, that's a bad cord there, and you can note, I removed that cord when he made it bad. Don't just do it and leave it up to his notes. You take notes, because that when you go and do to negotiate, you have your notes that remind you of what was going on at the time. You have the pictures of what he took so that he doesn't give you copies of his pictures, so you've got an idea of what pictures he's going to have. So you want to, shadow him and keep these things, write them down and keep notes of them.
Okay, so we just finished walking around the place of work. Now we have what they call a closing conference.
Absolutely. And after you do the walkthrough, the closing conference is going to be held, and the compliance officer is going to provide you with an overview of what he's found. He's going to advise you of your rights as well as the employee rights as to what can be done. He's going to tell you you have the right to contest a citation. In some cases, you may want to contest immediately because you have limited time. He's going to tell you he's not going to issue the citations that day. OSHA has up to 6 months to issue the citations because, once again, any citation they give you is an alleged violation. And an alleged violation, there's certain proofs that OSHA has to have. Yeah, they had to prove you knew it was there, and if it's a written regulation, they have to prove you knew it was there. And they do that through a number of different means. But they have to build the case in case you do take it to court that they can. They'll give you the citation after they've done the closing conference and they'll wait to get your information back, and it takes a couple, 2 or 3 weeks. So generally your citations are going to be issued a month or more after the ventilation, up to 6 months. In some cases it takes up to 6 months because they have to do some background investigation. They may have something that looks like a violation that they'll need to research and see what the manufacturer's recommendations are for that particular piece of equipment, or what the recommendations are from the various testing laboratories, or what the hazards are with certain chemicals that won't just be at their fingertips. So at the closing conference, they're going to tell the people what their rights are, what they found, and what they can expect and close the conference. And it may, they, once again, if it's a union and a involved, in the company may or may not allow the union to go into the closing and opening conferences, but if they don't allow the union, then the union will get an opening and a closing conference with OSHA as well, so that they'll hear the same things. So that concludes, and then the closing conference is done. And that's where I would hope you would want to call at Lancaster and say, hey, call them when OSHA gets on the site and say, OSHA's here, what do I do? Well, you've got this sheet we gave you, read it, and you tell your people this is what to do, but let me talk to the compliance officer, and then you talk to him and you find out what he's doing. They can be extremely, extremely helpful and save you a lot of money if you have a good safety and health consultant like Lancaster.
So, so now let's say if you do contest it, what happens then, Irv?
Well, you have 15 days with which to contest a citation. You can still have, within 15 days, an informal conference to discuss it. But once you contest it, it goes to the next level. It will go to a settlement conference. They'll try to settle it. They'll do it the informal conference. If they can't seem to settle it there, then you'll take your case and your evidence against the citations to an administrative law judge. And there's times, again, that could happen, but normally, if you have a good safety program and a good safety consultant, you won't have to do very many contested violations. Usually, it's pretty clear what you've done right and what you've done wrong.
Now, is there any way to avoid citations during a planned inspection?
You don't have any violations.
There you go.
I mean, if you've got a good safety and health culture and a safety and health program and it's enforced and it's followed, there's always room, always look to improve. OSHA looks hard at what your intent is. There are defenses if you get citations. And again, the employers have certain defenses, and which is infeasibility, employee misconduct, things like that are affirmative defense, that there was no way we could have done this, we weren't able to do that, or something like that.
Yeah, I noticed in the slider that got the VPP banner there that Lancasters have earned, and very prestigious award. Have you been familiar? Are you familiar with those VPP sites?
Well, I've done VPP audits myself when I was with OSHA. VPP is a voluntary protection program that is a recognition program by OSHA. In order to become a VPP participant, you have to have your records keeping, or your incidents and illnesses and things like that, have to be half the national average, below the national average, I think by half. You have to have a safety and health program. There's about 4 different things. You have to have management commitment, employee involvement. You have to have worksite analysis. You have to have training. There's, right off the top of my head, there's 4 components. One of them is management commitment, employee involvement, worksite hazard analysis, hazard control, and training. And I'm not hitting the other one like I should, but I haven't done that for a little bit.
So
you hit all 4, Irv. You hit all 4.
Okay, well, I thought so, but
training's very important.
Well, training is extremely important. We have to have training. You wouldn't turn over $1 million piece of equipment to somebody to operate without at least giving them a little bit of training and say, this is how to shut it off and turn it on. This is what you do. I mean, we're talking people's lives here. I don't want anybody working on my job site or even working in my neighborhood or on my house that isn't trained for what they're doing. And safety is always remember, safety is a part of work. I mean, it's a condition of employment. You cannot be employed if you can't do it safely, because you're going to be putting yourself and the other and your employer at risk. And there's no employer that wants to have accidents. There's no employee that wants to be hurt. But we have to communicate with one another that this is the best for all of us. And it's proven fact that safety is a resource, and it saves you money. Safety does pay. For every dollar invested, they say you'll have a $3 return on investment for safety programs. I think that's Liberty Mutual or one of those insurance companies. Okay?
Okay, so what is the magic? What is the key formula to make this
Do
happen?
it safe. Do it safe. Be open. Document. Train. Take time to look at it from the other person's or the employee's perspective. Both the employer and employee should look at it from the other's perspective. If I'm the employee, I want to know why that employer wants to do it that way. I want to understand why he does it that way, rather than it has to be my way or else. It's understanding why they do things. I've been on a lot of construction projects where people think that the employer is out to just use them up and throw them away, and I've not really seen that myself, whereas I think most employers want employees, and they want to make them productive because they make money and the employees are making money. So safety is just
I'm looking at
so important.
looking at this formula here, and this is when Lancaster sends me out, we do the training, especially for the new hires. We keep that up to date. We do that at least once a year. We practice with the staff what to do when OSHA shows up. My favorite part is doing a mock OSHA inspection. And again, this is through Lancaster, so there's no fines incurred, but we can identify problems before OSHA comes out and identifies them. And again, it's just being proactive.
It's developing a safety program, just like, and part of that is going to be an emergency action program. Plan for what shouldn't happen so that you can plan to not have it happen. You take steps, and you let people know that they won't be disciplined for reporting safety issues. You just got to take care of your people, and you got to take care of your employer when you're working for someone. It's a relationship that should never be questioned. Between the safety between employer and employee should be there, and that's when you develop a culture.
Okay, looks like we're going to be
Corky,
wrapping up.
Irv, thank you guys so much. Like I appreciate your time and explaining how the OSHA inspection process happens, and I think we've been able to communicate a good game plan and some really good information to our audience today. And I want to encourage our audience here, if you do need some more questions answered, if there's some safety topics you're looking for, you can definitely hit up our website at lancastersafety.com. You can also reach us at 888-403-6026. We also have our safety questions email that is safetyquestions@lancastersafety.com. And as you can see here, we are on social media, Facebook, Google+, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And we do have some updates that you can kind of follow us and get more information from us. Again, gentlemen, thank you for your time, and to our attendees, we also appreciate your time in attending this webinar, and we hope to see you again on a webinar Wednesday. Thanks, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Brandon.